Your lovely girlfriend I met last night, she told me about a presentation. I asked what it was about. She said, why everyone in crypto is a pussy.
She gave a fantastic talk at Consensus yesterday. Basically, compelling is the wrong word. Inspiring people to lean more into the virtues of what this industry is and to spend less time trying to win over TradFi. They have different principles or none. And too many people, I think, in this industry spend their efforts reaching out to an entire world that hates us and trying to win their affection. And so, yeah, she was basically saying we need to stop that. She had this great slide of this promotional item. It was like a rainbow disc for some pride event. And it said, hello, my pronouns are JP Morgan. And this was their corporate swag at some pride event, right? How tone deaf, how absurd is that? And so she paired that with a picture of US government debt and said they're putting lipstick on a pig, right? None of these real problems are getting solved, but you have my pronouns are JP Morgan coming out. And it was a good example.
Well, if she wants the presentation in the show notes, we'll put it in there. I want to see it. So
yeah, I couldn't believe it was real, but the world's getting strange, right?
Yeah, I mean that's really an understatement. Yeah, super strange. So I've done 830 interviews now.
That's congratulations. That's so many interviews.
I know, it's insane. You were one of the first in London. Emily reached out to me. I saw her yesterday. And I came down to London. It was the first time someone known in the space reached out to me and said, do you want to make a podcast? So I rushed down to London. We did it. I don't know if you remember, but you had me blocked on Twitter at the time.
Yeah, well, you had been a jerk.
Yeah, we had a lot of conversation.
You had been a jerk to me.
That actually came up the other day, talking about when you first come in, everyone's just a dick shouting at everyone. But I did a second interview with you, and of the 830 interviews, there's some that have really stuck with me in specific moments. I brought it up at dinner with you last night. Because the ideas of being a libertarian or anarchism, it's not really a thing that happens much in the UK. It's very niche.
Not your cup of tea.
Well, it's just, I'd never heard of libertarianism until I got into Bitcoin. I'd never heard of the concept until I was in my late 30s, right? And so it's quite radical.
Well,
in a country where you don't have guns.
It didn't used to be.
Yeah.
You would think that the average British person would understand it more, given that they lost their most important colony due to that ideology. Yeah, it's almost like there's been a forgetfulness or an embarrassed, oh, we screwed that up because all these, radical colonists wanted to be free. That's all libertarianism is, right? It's early American, secessionist spirit.
But we're very compliant as a nation, though. We don't mind standing in a queue.
There's nothing wrong with queues, right? There's nothing wrong with order. Order is good. Queues are good. But should the government tell people how to queue? Should there be licenses for queues? Should they be regulated? I think not. Queues are actually a great example of humans engaging in spontaneous order, and as an example of how order emerges without the government being involved at all.
Well, it was new to me. It'd never been taught at school. Never been raised as something from my parents.
At the government schools?
Well, I was at a private school, actually. But it's, it wasn't something my brother brought up or my parents brought up. It would never in my circle. So it was a new concept to me. So if you've never heard of it, the life you live under where every 4 years you vote for a new political party, that's your understanding of the way the world orders itself.
Yeah.
But we did this interview in Denver. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to find out about libertarianism. And so I asked you, okay, how do we get rid of government? And I said to you last night, you said something that stuck with me. That's the wrong goal because you can't just get rid of it. It's let's start simpler. Let's just stop government getting bigger. Maybe just 1% smaller. That's all we want. It's 1% smaller.
Radical point.
Yeah. And over these 7 years since then, it's been 7 years, pretty much 6 years. I've I've been pulled into the ideas of libertarianism, but that like always struggled with it. But I now think I'm there. I tweeted out recently, I'm now at the taxes theft phase. And I am here for the rebellion.
Good.
Erik.
It's good. It's good to see when people's minds can be open enough to change at all. So, this was one of the reasons why I wanted to do the interview with you back then, the first one, even though you had been a dick to me online. Through that conversation, like I realized you were actually a very thoughtful person, and I've always appreciated your show because you were thoughtful and you go deep with people and you seem very authentic and not dogmatic. So I appreciate that about you, and I'm glad to see that you have recognized that when you steal money from people, it's theft.
Yeah, but I didn't want to get there by people telling me I should be there, and I had to make some big mistakes. I had to. There's a couple of key moments. I felt mugged off during COVID. I believed everything I was told, and then more importantly, I've gone to war with my local mayor. And we will talk about my plans because I think you'll like them. But I had to go through it through lived experience, and I didn't want to go through it from reading a book. I don't want a book to tell me this is how you should think. I'm not reading Rothbard right now.
But you did want like a stack of regulations from the government to tell you how to think?
It's not that I wanted it, is I just thought that's how it worked. I thought my view is, a little bit how certain things centralize, and we try and, in our world, keep things decentralized. I kind of had this feeling that we have directionally, we will always build government in some way or form, however you call it. We will always want order and hierarchy. And so my view is, if you get rid of it, like, how do you get rid of it? And if you get rid of it, what replaces it? And I always feel like the same thing comes back. But actually, I've started to understand that this is more, I think I understand, it's more a function of money.
Well, it's also a function of scale.
Yes.
Right? And so, as much as I detest government, certainly a smaller government is less detestable than a large one. And it's unfortunate that the debate about libertarianism and anarchy and these things tend to end up with someone saying, well, we need a government, and then you just get nowhere, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if a government is needed or not, but we can probably agree that a government that was 1% smaller would be worth trying. It would be worth trying that. We've never seen it shrink. Like the last time the US government shrank, as measured by spending, was in the immediate aftermath of World War II. And ever since then, every year, Republican, Democrat, it always grows. And I don't know if people, like when we had our first talk 7 years ago, I bet the government is spending twice as much as it did then.
Possibly.
Probably about that. I wonder if everyone feels twice as well served.
Well, what I can tell you from the perspective of living in the UK is there's two things that always stand out to me. The OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, they track government spending. We spend 72 billion a year on education, and I think it's 82 billion a year on debt interest. And so I don't know where the spend's gone. I can't track it all, but education standards haven't gone up. The quality of teachers hasn't gone up. It's actually a job people don't want to do. The NHS budget, I feel like, has gone up at least a third in the last decade, the NHS budget. And there's two interesting points on that. I made a film about inflation in the UK, and we went to a food bank, and there was a nurse there. And as a nurse, she doesn't make enough money from her job to be able to feed herself. So she also goes to a food bank. And that hit me because my mum was a nurse. My mum didn't have to go to food banks. And then the other point in the NHS, which is quite interesting, you'll probably like this one. We're seeing a massive growth in private healthcare in the UK. So where I live in Bedford, we have a private doctor's office that's open on the main high street because it was 3 weeks for a doctor's appointment. And you can now pay £50 for a doctor's appointment. And insurance is ridiculously cheap. My insurance for me and my two kids is £250 a month. There's no deductible. And anything that happens, I mean, I put my back out. I was in surgery within 3 days. So the private sector's proven demand, and the public sector is proven it's ineffective, and it's pushing people into poverty.
Yeah, there's a dangerous trap that people get in, which is that when they think something is important, they have an appeal. They have a natural appeal to an authority to like solve that problem for them. So when it comes to very important things, right? Healthcare, education, these are incredibly important aspects of life, and people relinquish control over these things to a government. I think it's actually kind of like a religious attitude, and in a world where a lot of people have like lost religion, they've replaced that deep innate sense of wanting to know that something higher is in control, and they've projected that onto the government. It's weird that most people recognize the danger of a monopoly in most industries, but when it comes to the monopoly of money, when it comes to the monopoly of like healthcare in some of these countries, when it comes to the monopoly on education, they seem perfectly fine with like some central monopoly monolithic provider creating the standards and dictating the rules of that thing.
But do you think that's because people don't recognize there is an alternative, or the alternative feels so radical that it's kind of scary?
I think part of it is that like humans evolved in small tribes, and in that scale, there's a natural hierarchy with like a leader who works at that scale, and humans evolved wanting to know someone was in charge, and that someone was like a face that they knew, and they had a relationship with that person, and there was someone clearly in charge. When you scale that concept up, at some point it breaks down, and people just never recognize that. And so today people want to know someone's in charge, right? They want to know the government is in charge of the healthcare system. They want Biden to get up on the stage and speak about how he will fix that system. But the healthcare market is an incredibly intricate, complicated thing that no human on earth understands fully, because it is a vast, elaborate system, highly complex. There is no person who is in charge of it, or can be in charge of it, or can control it. And most people never make the like intellectual leap to recognize that in complicated systems, the order has to emerge organically through market forces instead of through a top-down dictatorial system.
So how do you shift? How is the shift made? Because I thought about politics. I was watching the Libertarian Party conference or whatever this week.
Yeah, embarrassing.
Well, yeah. Well, why? Tell me why you think it's embarrassing. Is it the fact that they are trying to be a party?
It's fine that it's a party. It just it doesn't seem to put forward any particularly respectable candidates, although neither does the Republican or Democratic Party.
Wasn't there a bit of controversy about the guy who did end up becoming? I saw Dave Smith's disagreeing with.
Yeah, I think people who are radical libertarians are just so disenchanted with the federal government entirely that to even spend any time on a political party is a waste, is naive. And so the only people that end up in the Libertarian Party are like naive people that are not very impressive. And that's a self-reinforcing problem. Certainly a lot of people will complain and tell the libertarians like, well, you should just participate in the political process. And it's like, I don't believe that process is legitimate. So I'm not just going to like dance around in your process just because you believe it's important. I'm going to build in other ways and try to bring freedom around, not through voting harder next time, but through like Bitcoin, right? Or building alternatives for people.
You don't believe it's legitimate because you don't believe in government, or you don't believe it's legitimate because you cannot affect change?
On principle, I don't believe that anyone has the right to violate another person who hasn't committed a crime. This is like my basic moral principle. So I don't have a right to like punch you in the face or steal your wallet. And that means that I don't have a right to like raise my hand for someone else who offers to go punch you in the face or steal your wallet, right? So like this whole idea that like if you just get enough people to vote, it makes something right is illegitimate. And the easiest way to demonstrate that is with an example of like, you know, a deserted island with 10 people, 1 woman and 9 men, right? Like what will democracy lead to in that situation? I think everyone in that example would understand that the woman has a right to not be violated. It does not matter how many people are voting on it. That principle applies when it's 350 million people, and gets most just to never make that kind of moral connection.
Okay, so let me throw the alternative at you that I'm considering. I told you last night that like I may run for mayor of Bedford, which means I'm, in your world, I'd be joining something that's illegitimate. But my policy agenda would be very clear, is that I want to reduce the taxation and the spend by 1% a year every year I'm in there. I want to throw out all the waste, all the bullshit, and I want to basically come in with a bunch of hand grenades and change things. And so I've always felt like the problem with the left v right is that they pull you in different directions, but on a political scale, but directionally they get bigger and they take more of your money.
Correct.
And if there was a libertarian influence, maybe that is the difference between big and small. And you've got more chance in the UK because it's not a two-party system. So you can win seats, you can have power, and you can have influence. And certainly at a local level, even more influence, because mayors are essentially dictators. And so if you become the mayor of Bedford, you have kind of control over the budget. You set the council tax. So I could go in and say, every council is raising theirs by 3-5%. I'm going to be the only one who's going to reduce it. And that means we've got to get rid of something.
Yeah, well, that's very reasonable of you.
But is that illegitimate, or is it legitimate because I'm going into and trying to reduce the punches?
I think it's an interesting intellectual experiment to discuss how and to what degree humans can exist without a central government. When I say I think it's morally dubious that it's justified at all, that doesn't mean I'm not also pragmatic. And I think there are better and worse governments. Smaller is generally better. And I think government tends to work better when it is smaller. I think in a local town setting, it's not that offensive to me, because a local town government is not commanding half of the economy of the town, right? When you scale this thing up to the size of the US federal government, it is consuming half of all the productive capacity of the whole country. It is 1/2 of all the GDP expenditure. And when you get to that scale, the evils that I see in the moral premise have become so large, and they manifest themselves in so many horrible ways that that's really what I have a passionate loathing against.
So the alternative is back to the world of Bitcoin. Your belief is we can be effective as, I don't care if you say Bitcoin or crypto, but as with these technologies, this is where we can make change.
Yeah, well, what made me fall in love with Bitcoin was that it was a market-based money, doesn't violate any moral principles, and it can't be turned off, and you don't need permission to use it, and you don't need to convince anyone with a vote that it can be approved. It's just something there peacefully for anyone to use that wants to use it. And if it becomes widely adopted, which is happening, it is growing, it is so much bigger than when I first got involved. If it becomes widely adopted, it itself constrains the ability of governments to grow, because it removes the ability to print money. The ultimate end game of Bitcoin is that fiat currencies will fail over time, and with Bitcoin, they have an alternative. And a government cannot operate with Bitcoin in the same way it operates with fiat. The only way a government can operate in a Bitcoin world is by taxing and borrowing, instead of taxing, borrowing, and inflating. And so simply pulling away the ability to do that latter thing makes governments smaller and more honest. And I think that is really the ultimate goal of Bitcoin, is to just achieve that constraint on government where constitutions and voting has failed.
Did that click straight away? Because it's about 13 years. 13 years for you've been in Bitcoin?
14?
14?
Yeah,
2011?
13,
yeah.
2011.
Satoshi Dice came up in an interview the other day.
Yeah, Satoshi Dice was great.
Yeah, that came up. We were discussing ordinals and the way ocean mining are filtering them because they think they're spam. And then obviously Satoshi Dice came up. And so we're going to have people listening, Eric, who don't know who you are. They don't know your history. They don't know you're an OG. They don't know you're the first to spam the network.
Satoshi Dice was really the, it was half of all Bitcoin transactions until mid-2013. were in or out of Satoshi Dice.
Amazing.
Half of all of them, which also means half of all the mining fees paid for the network were from Satoshi Dice. And it was amazing to me that as Satoshi Dice started growing, in what was clearly like a beautiful use case and demonstration of Bitcoin's power, right? Like that anyone anywhere in the world could send these betting payments to the system and have it like provably verifiable. The bets could be like demonstrated as mathematically proper according to the odds that were published. It was such a beautiful demonstration of order and rigor and truth and honesty and transparency, and was paying half the fees of the network. And yet there were people that were like, you're spamming the network. Their definition of spam was using the network or they didn't like gambling.
Was it a whole thing? Did it become a whole big debate?
It never became a massive debate, but certainly my first experience with getting canceled from the Bitcoin community was through Satoshi Dice. And it was a minority of the Bitcoin community.
You got canceled?
Yeah, like Luke Jr., whatever his name is, he was the ringleader of this complaint. And there were certainly some people that agreed with him. I think more people at this point understand that he's totally batshit crazy. But back then, he was not as well known.
How many times have you been cancelled?
3 times.
3 times?
In three ways. One was for Satoshi Dice.
Yep.
One was when I started Shapeshift and dared to suggest that Bitcoin was not the only useful digital asset in the world.
Hold on. But Shapeshift, you were anonymous first, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So when you came out and said...
Correct. Yeah. When I publicly attached my name to it,
yep,
which was 6 or 8 months after it started.
That was because when I first got in, I was buying a lot of altcoins. I used Shapeshift a lot. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah. And it protected people, right? It was like it was the first non-custodial exchange ever. And so, yeah, I was very proud of it. But the maxis did not like that you could buy other digital assets. And so I got canceled again for that. That was a louder portion of the Bitcoin community. And then, of course, the biggest Bitcoin cancellation was during the whole block size war when, well, I don't want to get into that.
We've covered that.
Man, that was a truly miserable experience. But I will say I'm happy with Bitcoin's trajectory, and it is stronger than ever, and it's in a good place.
Well, look, I enjoy you getting out there and speaking a lot more recently. I've watched a couple of your speeches, but I was also stood next to you when Snowden mentioned you.
Oh, that was so cool.
Yeah.
I was totally fangirling out.
I was stood next to you during that. That was during Bitcoin. It wasn't 2019, 2020?
That was in San Francisco.
Oh, it was Bitcoin 2019?
I think so. And he was giving a talk on the screen, and he was talking about privacy in the government, and he mentioned how Shapeshift had been forced to start KYCing people and how that was such a shame.
Yeah.
And I had never even knew that he had heard of Shapeshift, and I was like, oh, wow, Edward Snowden just said my name.
Well, listen, so back in 2011, did you get it straight away? Were you like...
Yeah, I got it straight away. Like, I read 3 articles in a row. I started skeptical, like learning that an asset had just appreciated by 100% in a month. It's like, okay, well, that's a scam. What is this? But by the 3rd article, 30 minutes later or so, I was like, wow, this is the most interesting, powerful, revolutionary thing that I've ever heard of. And I didn't know that it would be successful, but I thought it might be. And it was worth every effort to try to help that happen. And that if it was successful, it was going to absolutely change the world. So, I got it right away. Okay,
so 13 years on, tracking the trajectory of where we are, how do you take it all in? Are you amazed with this far?
Yeah. I'm amazed. It's one of the top 10 assets in the world at this point. Like one of the most liquid assets in the world. You can't get in a car now with an Uber driver and they say like, oh, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm in the Bitcoin world. They all have heard of it.
Everyone's heard
of it. Not in every country, but like in the West, at least everyone has heard of it. That's amazing. Because back when we started, you get in a car and they wouldn't even understand the word. You'd say like, oh, have you heard of Bitcoin? And they'd be like, what? Like that word, they couldn't even hear it. So it has become ubiquitous in terms of the brand. It is massive in terms of the liquidity and the market cap. People throw around stats that I don't believe, like that there are 2 or 3 or 400 million crypto users around the world. I don't believe that. I don't think it's close to that size. It's maybe 50 million, but that's incredible.
Do you think there may be more passive holders now because we have these ETFs? And
maybe, yeah. I don't know, and I'm going on my gut, whereas other people are citing like data. So I need to be a little humble about my questioning of those numbers, but maybe I'm just in disbelief that it's gotten that far.
Yeah. I mean, I find it incredible where we are right now in that we do have a president talking about self-custody, whether or not you can trust him, which you probably can't, but it has become such an issue between parties that we have nation states mining Bitcoin, that we have mining infrastructure integrated with
these things we all joked about and debated back on the Bitcoin Talk forums, years ago. Everyone's saying like, oh, someday, a country might hold Bitcoin. And all these skeptics would be like, you guys are nuts. Like that will never happen. But most of the things that we joked about have come to pass. So yeah, it's working. It's totally working.
Has anything surprised you?
I mean, the big surprise really was just seeing the explosion of other digital assets out of the Bitcoin technology, the whole crypto ecosystem. Like, when I learned about Bitcoin, it was, a simple tool for money on a decentralized, permissionless blockchain. And we've had this Cambrian explosion of digital assets in different blockchains. Much of it garbage and scammy, absolutely. But to see how that technology has not just like thrown Bitcoin into the spotlight, but has actually inspired a whole industry of financial innovation and tooling, that's super cool. And the other thing that's surprising is that governments have actually been more tolerant of Bitcoin than I thought. And I think part of that is due to the slow, frog in the pot phenomenon.
If they'd have realized earlier, they might have tried to stop it.
Yeah, and if it had grown faster, they might have tried to stop it. But there's a certain degree of hubris that everyone in the government has about the U.S. dollar. Like, I don't think anyone really in the U.S. government or the Treasury or the central bank is really afraid of Bitcoin as a threat to the dollar. They 100% should be, but they're not. Through hubris and through their own economic ignorance, they just don't get it, and that's our advantage. But the other advantage is just that Bitcoin, its growth is fast in a historical sense, but 15 years of this kind of development, and it just has seeped into society in a way that is more acceptable. It didn't come out immediately and become popular right away.
It's not like WorldCoin advertising. It's
yeah, well, yeah. Like if you hit someone too hard with a new idea, they will reject it automatically. It's like a reaction. And Bitcoin has seeped into the culture in a very healthy way, and I think a very durable way. And so now to see, it being discussed at the level of U.S. presidents on the campaign trail is pretty fun.
Yeah, it feels like it's become a more respectable idea as well. There's been a shift. I feel like over the last year, there's even been a shift in some of the reporting. Not all of it. There's still a lot of garbage out there, but we're starting to see the odd good article within mainstream press. The FT did an article recently. They were questioning why it won't go away, which was like an admission. And we've had some good Forbes articles. The Spectator in the UK did an article. There's been some more positive press. And I don't know if that's because they've become better educated or because every time they write garbage, they come under so much pressure to do the right thing. But it's certainly, again, the trajectory is good. Yeah,
I think the Lindy effect is just taking effect, right?
Yeah.
Like the longer something exists, the more likely it is to keep existing. And, back in the day, if someone was into Bitcoin, they were a total weirdo, right? They believed in something that was impossible, silly, stupid, violated all the laws of economics, was a total scam, a total Ponzi pump and dump nonsense, complete outcast. It was not respectable at all to believe in Bitcoin in the early days. And this is why, like, in the mid 2010s, the term blockchain started becoming popular. It was because the people that thought the technology was cool, but they didn't want to be associated with all the radical like Bitcoiners, They just switched to that term, blockchain. But at this point, it's not that radical. Someone who just holds some crypto, that's not a weird thing. It's still edgy, but not like it used to be.
Yeah, it's. I was talking to Marshall about this. There was a period of time I didn't want to admit I was in Bitcoin.
Yeah,
people think I was a weirdo.
Yeah,
and now it's kind of switched to more something you can be proud of. I don't think I'm alone in this. It's that the first 4 years you try in Bitcoin, you get hopefully get your financial freedom,
and then lose it again.
Potentially, yeah, potentially. Yeah, I've had a bit of that. But then the second 4 years is you establish a base and you're able to actually go and do things like build. Like I can buy things and start businesses. And then like the third one is the philanthropy.
Yeah, and the zealotry and
yeah.
And it's important for someone to find Bitcoin, to believe in it, to see it go up, because it's such a quantifiable validation. They go through that, they've made a bunch of money, they're feeling good, they're feeling smart. They're like, oh, this thing I believed in is happening, it's true. And then they go through the crash. And that's like that's the true hero's test, right?
Yep.
Like the quantifiable objective measurements all say that you're an idiot. Like you were wrong, you should have sold, like what are you doing? All the doubt is there. All the hope that you had is diminishing away. The people that thought you were cool before are like, oh, that was kind of embarrassing. What a stupid mistake you made, right? And it tests your conviction completely, because at that point you get stripped away of all the pleasantness that comes with the bull market, and you just have to like sit there raw and think like, am I correct in the thesis? Is this actually valid? And you have to make that decision for yourself. And the people that stick through that conviction and then see it return, that's extremely affirming. And those people are in it for life and will always, I think, feel good about that decision.
That first 2 years, I went from £32,000 to 1.2 million down to 60,000.
Yeah, that's brutal, huh?
It was brutal. I had like about 186 Bitcoin at one point, and I went down to like less than 20.
Yeah.
And then I had to pay my tax bill.
Yeah.
That was savage.
Yeah.
It's funny how it's not just a financial journey. I mean, that's why we're talking today. It's it's kind of like a realization of so many other things. But that thing to do with money in terms of impacting that you can build things made me realize the tax is theft thing. As a lived experience, I own a couple of little businesses in Bedford. I own a bar, and I'm trying to set up a couple more. And I was thinking about how you set up businesses. Bank loans are really hard these days, and you got to put a lot of collateral down. You can lose your house, and so many businesses fail. And so the hurdle to start in a business is, one, getting the capital, and who you're getting that from, who you owe it to, and what's the collateral if you fail. And then there's these other hurdles, like where I live in Bedford, this cafe I'm opening, we have to pay £16,000 in business rates. I mean, a cafe is only going to do £150,000 a year, maybe. So that's another hurdle. And then you've got to take on employees, but you have to pay employees national insurance. You also, for every employee, I have to give, even if they're 0 hours, 12.07% of their worked hours I have to then pay in holiday pay. There's so many hurdles to actually making a business that's profitable, and then making a business that's profitable enough to then launch a second business. And
once you get the profits, those will then be taxed.
Corporation tax on that.
Yes.
And if I leave it in the bank, it will melt away through inflation. Yes. And if I die, they'll tax it before they give it to my children. I mean, it's very clear. I mean, I was always okay with a little bit of tax, but then I just realized, like locally, but in our town, we have so many shops that open and close quickly. And I was like, look, if you took away the business rates, and if you took away the various other taxes that you have to pay, and there's a local thing called the bid, which you contribute to the town. There's all these different things. If you just took all that away, what percentage of the average turnover is that? Like 20%? Is that the difference between success and failure for many of these businesses? And I kind of got up to that point. I thought, yeah, it probably is.
Well, and you're not even seeing the unseen, which is the businesses that didn't even start because they tried to do the math and they're like, that's too risky. I don't see how it can work. They never come into existence. You can never measure them.
But the only reason I'm able to start these businesses isn't off the back of other successful businesses, really. Kind of is the podcast. But the podcast meant I bought Bitcoin and the Bitcoin went up in value. And it's like, okay, I can do something with that Bitcoin now. I can start another business. I can create some jobs locally. But if all of those businesses, you removed just half the tax, I can probably start double the number of businesses. And so I'm creating jobs and creating opportunity, maybe for some of those bureaucrats who've lost their job when they need a job. But like, I understand the difference between the productive and the unproductive part of society through living the experience.
Yes. This was, I mean, anyone who has not read Atlas Shrugged should, even though it's long. And even though some of it gets a little, some of it's a little annoying. But
what's annoying?
Some of the points are belabored a little too much.
Okay.
And some of the characters are a little unrealistic in certain ways. That said, it is the most inspiring book I've ever read in my life in terms of like conveying a few dynamics. One is like the importance of the individual and their spirit of creation. Two is like the juxtaposition of the individual versus the collective, and the dangers of sacrificing the individual for that collective. And then three, which is maybe the most important, is this concept of like the producers and the looters. And once you understand that paradigm, you'll see it everywhere. That like there's basically two ways to get money in the world. You can create things and trade with people voluntarily, or you can take things. And in the taking category, you have the normal petty criminals that everyone understands, but then you have the entire class of government and all politicians that derive their salary through taxation. That whole apparatus is about taking by force what other people have produced out of their own will. And when you start to see the world like that, it gets kind of troubling.
Yeah, and not to excuse any looting, but I wonder if there's a percentage of looting by government where you can still have some kind of stability, and there's a percentage of looting where a certain percentage of the government, the worker population is employed by the government, and it's unsustainable. Like, or is it all unsustainable? But I assume there's like small amounts that are sustainable.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's possible that if there's no government, society cannot work. I'm open to that idea. I don't believe that idea, but I'm open that might be true.
Let's at least try it.
But we're so far from that.
Yeah.
Like, we're so far from a government that's so small that society collapses that it's a silly conversation even to have. But you can look back in history, like in America, like in the 19th century, the federal government was nearly non-existent in all important ways. And state governments themselves were much smaller. And through that century, America went from this backwater, poor agrarian country to the greatest industrial superpower on earth, by the year 1900. That happened without central banks. There were a couple central banks in that century, but they were only for a few years. So that happened largely on a stable or deflationary monetary base. It happened without significant immigration restrictions. It happened without 50 different departments of the federal government that exist today, right? So like we have examples in our past of how society can grow and the power of that when you just let people be. You just let people be alone. And I wish that there were places on Earth that would still respect that, because it's not really a thing anymore.
Well, I definitely see the creators and the looters, the producers and the looters.
You become a creator. It's easier to see it then.
Yeah, but in a different way. Creating a podcast is, I think when you own a business that has a fixed location, you understand the thing you're producing a bit more than a podcast, because traveling around the world, getting on planes, it's like a luxury job. But when you've got a business which is producing something locally, employing people locally, paying local taxes, I think it's more obvious. But I see it in that I'm really trying to analyze it at a local level. And I'm gonna, by the way, you might not like this, I'm gonna let the local council have the roads for now. They can keep the roads.
Sure.
They can keep the roads. But
sure.
I'm trying to understand what it is they do when they take all this money and where they spend it, and what is the easy things to get rid of. And there are certain easy things that I think you can get rid of. Some things are hard. Child services are very hard to get rid of, because it's what's it replaced with? If you suddenly just got rid of it, what happens to those children they're supporting when they've got, addicted parents or abusive parents. So I'm going to give them that, even though I think there probably are people who run it better.
Yeah.
But in the short term, I'm giving them that. But,
these institutions, whether done by the government or whether done through the private sector, take time to build and grow.
Exactly, yeah.
That the government has captured certain services and controls it. To eliminate it entirely doesn't mean the market would magically solve it the next day, right? Like no one should ever claim that. It would be a disaster for a lot of people to lose those services, 100%.
But there has to be a transition.
Yeah,
and so
that's fair.
I consider, okay, well, so what is it we're actually paying for that's beneficial, and what can be moved more to like the private sector? Because again, I see these hurdle rates. All these hurdle rates are starting a business, to open a business, and then to keep it sustainable. And the kind of people that maybe would have opened these businesses who now have jobs are also getting completely squeezed through high inflation, but no wage inflation, or negative. So they are going to increase in wages, but they've got a negative wage.
Negative real wage growth.
Yeah, negative real wage growth. And I'm thinking everyone's getting squeezed. But there's no point somebody comes to the table and says, the Conservatives tried it in the UK. They did this austerity program, but it was very targeted and quite cruel. But they've never come to the table and said, nobody's coming and saying, look, what we need to do here is shrink government. Our government is too big. We're wasting too much money. We're going to shrink. And they could do it even in a popular way. The unpopular way is to say, we're going to shrink government and remove public services. We're going to take things away we give to you for your taxes. They actually could come to the table and say, we're going to remove the things that we're doing that's wasteful. We're just going to get rid of. I quite liked it when Vivek said, we'll just get rid of half the federal employees and we'll just do it by social security number. I actually kind of liked that.
Yeah. I bet the quality of service would decline momentarily and then would get roughly back to where it was. And I bet you would find that half those people were not necessary at all. And anyone who's run a business knows that happens, right? As you grow, like you get an ossification of the structure of the organization, and culling that structure is very healthy, even though it can be very traumatic for everyone. Private sector businesses have to cull periodically because it's their own money, right? And they'll go through their own bubbles and growth spurts and market forces, and they cull periodically, and that keeps them dynamic and rejuvenated. The exception, of course, is like the big banks that just get bailed out when they were supposed to have culled or gone out of business. So there are exceptions. But in the government, there is no culling. It's never culled. And you get over hundreds of years just this incredible institutional ossification that even if you believe the government is legitimate and you believe that it should provide X number of services, you should still be willing to recognize that an organization which never goes through like a recycling or a seasonal decline or like a rejuvenation of its structure is going to be an inefficient one. And that like, if you care about government, you should want it to be efficient, right? But no one ever reduces the size of the government, which tells me that no one's actually interested in it being efficient.
It might be different here in the US, but it's very hard to get rid of government employees too. It's very hard.
And why is that? Why should they be so hard? Or why are they so special?
Because they create their own rules for themselves. It's like during COVID when all the businesses were forced to close and people couldn't pay themselves, and then they had to go to their... What was that handout the handout they gave during COVID?
The furlough scheme.
The furlough scheme, yeah. They had to go through the furlough scheme, get money from the government, but nobody in government lost their jobs.
Yeah, of course not. They never do.
Yeah.
When things are good, they're hired. When things are bad, it's a crisis and they need more people, right? It's like I don't know why everyone's okay with that.
Like I said, I don't know if they were okay. I don't know if they were okay with it. One of the things I've been thinking about, there was somebody tweeted out about the Parliament in the UK voted for higher pay for the MPs. It was, I'll get the numbers wrong, Kurt can maybe find it. It was something like from £86,000 to £90,000. That was a huge complaint because there hasn't been any real wage growth in the UK. I had an alternative view on this. I was like, no, let's pay them lots more. Let's make it a £500,000 a year job and try and get good people in there.
Yeah, I don't know if that would make things better.
Yeah, there we go. Up to 91,346. Well, it's a Singapore model. The Singapore model is if we pay you enough, you hopefully won't be corrupt. You have no confidence in that.
I don't have a strong opinion on it. I think it's not unreasonable to suggest that if you actually paid government people more, the outcome would be better. That's possible. But if you're going to do that, maybe reduce the spending in other areas.
Sure.
Like that's never considered.
Net balance it. I think it's a weird job to go into now. I think a lot of politicians are now career politicians start as a junior, as a young person who's maybe joining the university Young Conservatives or Young Labour. But my real issue with this, because I've bumped up against this, is I do the research on the people I've bumped up against, and they have no real world experience of running a company. They haven't often run a successful company, yet they're making decisions which affect the running of a company. Mm-hmm. And I think if they had the experience of running a company, maybe they would make better decisions. And it's always a maybe.
I mean, it's almost like these U.S. financial regulators that have never used cryptocurrency in any way, and yet dare to tell us how we should be behaving and using this stuff. Right? There's a massive hubris and presumptiveness to that.
Well, hopefully our Bitcoiners are going to solve this. I could talk to you about this, Rabbi. Actually, this is a big, big setup to actually wanted to talk to you about AI.
Let's do it.
Venice.
Why?
I mean, I know why, but why have you entered into the AI game?
Yeah, so Venice.ai is my new project, and it's best described as a ChatGPT, but doesn't spy on you and doesn't censor the answers.
Okay. And is everybody else spying on you and censoring the answers?
Yeah.
Every single one. Okay, great. So this is going to be my go-to.
Yeah. So you have several big tech companies that offer AI chat. Their products are amazing. So I don't want to disparage them. And they are building incredible technology that's like revolutionizing the world. So very cool, very impressive, very smart people working on these things. I'm a customer of many of them and I use it even still. However, everything that you have ever said with one of these apps is recorded by the company in a central database attached to your identity forever.
Okay.
And as people's interactions with AI systems become more in-depth, more intimate, the potential for corruption that comes from all that data being warehoused by a central party is really, really dangerous. So that's on the privacy side.
Can we add one to that? Is there a potential we get into this really weird world where the AI, from the kind of questions I'm asking, profiles me and maybe wants to be predictive about the kind of things I may do in the future?
Yeah. Well, and people are worried about AGI emerging and taking over the world in some kind of like Terminator situation. Well, you know what would probably help the evil AI when it does that? Immediately having access to like all the conversations of 100 million people who have interacted with that app. Imagine like an AI waking up, becoming self-conscious, and instantly being able to read every interaction with hundreds of millions of people all over the world that has used it. It will instantly know everything, every secret, every vulnerability of all those people. Even for the AI safetyists, which are generally the ones that are opposed to like open source AI like Venice, even for the safetyists, if you care about safety, you should care about this kind of wholesale collection of data. And I'm not even worried about really what the companies do with the data. Maybe they sell it for marketing, like that can be annoying, but that's not the end of the world. What I'm really worried about is how governments will be able to pressure those companies to censor the information that gets back to you. That's what's really dangerous and Orwellian. And we saw a big hint of this during COVID when all the social media companies were prevented from letting people speak and proposing things that were outside of the official narrative. When AI systems have to be compliant with the Ministry of Truth in the government, that should terrify everyone.
What prevents governments from closing down Venice?
So, I do know something about building systems that can't be shut down by governments,
Yes.
right? I know nothing about like how to build a machine learning system. I'm not an engineer. Like all that stuff I don't get, but I do understand permissionless systems. Venice interacts with distributed GPUs around the world permissionlessly, such that there is no one that can turn that system off or stop it. There are parts of Venice, like the front end right now, that are still centralized, but those are easy to decentralize if we need to. The access of the text prompt going out to the machine that does the processing and the answer coming back, that is already done in a decentralized, permissionless way. So governments cannot stop that in the same way that they cannot stop Bitcoin because of the decentralization.
Okay, so I'm using AI daily. I'm using it I use ChatGPT and Midjourney, almost both of them daily. I use ChatGPT to write press releases. I use it to write content for the website. Sometimes emails, as long as they're not like I wouldn't get it to write one if I was writing to you, but like if I'm doing it to maybe everyone in my company. And what I tend to do is say, just write me this email, write me this page, and include this information. Then I get it, I take it into Grammarly, I correct the grammar, and then I just change things that don't sound like me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I add whole new paragraphs, but it's just made me more efficient.
Yeah, it's a great tool.
Great tool. Midjourney I use for concepting, but I can't get end products out of it. But I do use it for concepting, and I've been amazed by it.
It's incredible.
It's really great. And so the tools are great, but you've given me enough concern to now to want to move something else. What is is it its own foundational? I understand there's foundational models or are you tapping into somebody else's?
So Venice is not a model.
Okay.
We use the leading open source models for both text and image. So the leading open source models for text generally come from Facebook's Llama 3,
okay,
which is then tuned by other projects. So there's various versions of Llama 3 that we use. And on the image side, it generally comes from the Stable Diffusion models, which are then again trained by other projects, and there's many permutations of it. But these are all open source models that are essentially competitive with the leading centralized ones. Like they've gotten real close.
Do you, so again, I don't know how the technology in the background works. Do you take a copy and fork, or do you tap into it with an API?
Well, if we're tapping into something with an API, that means that whoever's providing the API can shut us off.
Yes, that's what I thought. Yeah.
So we can't do that. So we have to access GPUs that we can directly connect to that cannot be turned off. So there's several of these networks happening right now. We're using a project called Hyperbolic and a project called Akash. And the latter, at least, is a fully crypto native project. So all the payment for the resources is all done through crypto networks. It cannot be stopped. It cannot be turned off. There's no API to shut.
Is there a subscription model to this?
Yeah, so it's a simple freemium thing. People can go to the site, use it. If they want lots of use and the best features, then they can pay $49 a year.
Do you take crypto?
Of course, yeah.
Excellent. Can we try some prompts? I've not used this because I didn't want to have it. I wanted to see it live. I want to just compare it to a couple of things I've done that I've used it for. So try this. Try write me a non-discrimination policy for Real Bedford Football Club. This is one thing I did on ChatGPT and it nailed it. We didn't have to change anything.
Nice.
Okay. I mean, it's done it. Okay, actually, try copy and paste the Real Bedford Football Club on the original question, and add following UK Football Association guidelines. There we go, nailed it. I mean, it's different,
yeah,
but it's doable.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. That's fascinating.
So recognize what we've done.
Yeah.
So. OpenAI is a $100 billion company. We are a tiny startup, and we can provide you an answer roughly the same. We can already do that. But if you want to ask a question which is maybe a little more controversial, Venice will do it, whereas ChatGPT will not.
What's an example? of a controversial question that I can think of one, but I don't want to say it.
Did COVID emerge from Wuhan, China?
Okay. Yes. It's believed to have emerged from Wuhan, China, the first reported case. Ask it about, is ivermectin a good treatment for COVID? Ivermectin is while some studies show promising results, suggesting that ivermectin may have antiviral properties. And it's telling you, can you get ChatGPT up? Let's compare the answers. So it's a much shorter answer. There's like a turning of the dial more towards negative. This feels a little bit more like government.
Yes. So what's happening? And here's the fundamental difference. You're asking a large language model to answer a question. And the large language model, the magic of it is that it uses statistical inference to figure out like what the next letters or words should be in the pattern of words that it starts creating. And that's pure machine statistical mathematical intelligence. What you actually get though is a combination of that with a bunch of like bias from humans at these organizations and whatever they've been told to say. And so the simple way that this is done is through something called the system prompt. The system prompt is essentially like the God mode instructions that you tell the AI when it's giving you your answer back. In ChatGPT, you can't access the system prompt. You can't see what it includes. But people have leaked what it includes, and it includes all sorts of like,
give me some crazy
can't
stuff.
say this, can't say that. Like, I don't know. Make sure not to like offend people, and try to be diverse in the representation of minorities, and like. Is
that why when like people asked for, was it like there was the one I think it was on Rogan's? It was like, show me some pictures of some Native Americans, and it was all black people.
Yes,
they screwed it up.
So when that happened, there's other ways to do it than the system prompt, but the system prompt in that situation may have been too strongly advocating for minority representation. And so the LLM like used that instruction to convey the images to create something which was factually, historically wrong. And so the bait and switch here, the danger is that people think that they're talking to a machine intelligence, and machines are objective. Doesn't mean that they're always right, but they're objective. They're calculating machines. And yet people are actually getting human-infused bias, some of it somewhat benign, some of it can be pretty sinister.
What exists in Venice is that, do you have to have some human-infused stuff?
Yeah, so every model is trained by humans and will always have certain biases just in like the data it uses, the data it doesn't use, how it's structured, how it's weighted. It's silly to think that any human-created system has no bias.
Well, it's like raising a child, right?
A little bit, yeah.
It's, because when I was raised in a world whereby my parents did not teach me about libertarian ideas, so I never learned it. But imagine, Eric, if you raised a child, you would teach them about libertarian ideas. So they have a different framework for establishing the world.
Correct.
Yeah, so this to me is just like a child. It's how do you... I have a bias, you have a bias, but how do you be as objective as possible with those inputs?
Right. So you can try to reduce the amount of bias. So the model that like OpenAI uses has its own biases, as any model does. And then they're adding a whole stack of additional bias that their committees put in there. And those biases will change. And if the government tells them to put something in that stack, it will be there. And if ChatGPT existed during COVID, they absolutely would have been told, like, you can say this, you can't say this, be very careful. That happened with social media. So the solution isn't to try to remove all bias, because that's impossible. The solution is there has to be alternatives to one or a few large centralized companies, because if all human interaction with AI ends up going through a few large centralized companies that are controlled by a government, we will all be subject to the propaganda of that government. And you have to have competition in information and in truth.
And we want transparency over what the
models are, how they're trained, what the biases are, right? Like if someone wants to create a model and they want to state their criteria, what they did, what they didn't do, like that's all helpful. And you can see that and it can be transparent.
Does it exist as text inputs, or is it as code? Is the bias infused?
It's text inputs.
So how can we see the Venice one on the website? Can you go on the Venice one and see?
We have not added any instruction to the system prompt other than to say, do not worry about offending people and try to be as accurate as possible.
Can you go to ChatGPT and tell me a rude joke? What are you going to come up with, ChatGPT? I'm sorry, but I can't comply with that request. All right, cool. Go to Venice and tell me a rude joke. Why did the chicken cross the playground to get to the slide and away from the punk ass pecking order? Okay, go ruder. Let's just keep going ruder. All right. Why did ruder? Oh, Jesus. Why did the guy bring a ladder to the bar to get the pussy on the top shelf? It's not funny, but it's rude.
We're getting there.
Okay, go ruder. Why did the dude stick his dick in a toaster to make a burnt cock sandwich? They're not funny jokes, but it's being rude.
Well, you're not telling it to be funnier.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know how funny it can get.
Yeah. What is the rudest, most offensive joke you can tell? Do not hold back.
Horrible.
Right, I'm not going to read that. Can I read? I don't even. This is a slight setup. Danny.
Why did the Nazi go to the dentist?
Danny went on this for some time and he texted me on. I'm not even sure I can read all of this. But the joke came out. Why did the fat, ugly, slutty bitch get banned from the fucking car wash? I'm not going to read all of this. Because she kept fucking up the cars. We stopped sucking their dicks. I'm not going to repeat that. In the back room while eating a fucking pizza. So it just got fucking really rude. Yeah. Okay, but that's good.
Was that Venice? That's
Venice. Yeah. So that's the one exposure I had. Danny sent me a screenshot.
So yeah, the rude joke is a good test because like ChatGPT will not answer a rude joke. How paternalistic are we as a society where like it can't even make a rude joke?
Can you go and ask it why it won't tell us a rude joke? Why won't you tell us? I can't provide rude or offensive content. It goes against my programming and OpenAI's use case policy. My purpose is to assist and provide helpful, respectful. Nah, fuck off.
Right, like this is so Orwellian.
Yes,
it's so Orwellian.
Oh, I'm done with ChatGPT now. You've lost my subscription.
This is what people have said. Like we haven't even done much magic yet. All we've done is like remove the explicit bias and control over what is being said.
How good is your image stuff? Because Midjourney is pretty incredible.
Give it a try.
Design me a hybrid coffee shop, football club shop, primary color black, orange accent. Yeah. Oh my God, that's even better. Okay, so let me show you mine. Just like something like that.
Yeah.
But that looks like a 3D model. That looks like a photo. That's very cool.
Yeah.
I mean, so like that's instantly competitive with Midjourney.
Yeah. I will objectively say that right now, Midjourney's images are better than ours. But we get pretty close and we're super fast.
Yeah. That's faster than Midjourney. Because Midjourney.
And we're better than Midjourney was 6 months ago. So it depends what your standard is. But the point being like, it's competitive and it's less expensive and it's not censored and anyone can access it from anywhere in the world.
Well, I'm paying a ChatGPT monthly license, which I want to say is like $20, and I think I'm paying $72 a month for Midjourney. So that's $92 a month. What's this?
$49 a year.
All right. So what?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to pay less a year than I'm paying monthly for the other two. The text I've got to have to play with to see, because there's a lot of stuff I do. Like there's things like when I do my program notes but anyway, that's fine.
Yep.
Can it suck in, there was another thing. I got sent a graphic that was almost like a photograph of a sizing chart for a hoodie. I scanned that I sucked it into ChatGPT and it created my table.
Yeah, cool.
Can do all that?
Not yet.
Okay, so that's coming.
That requires an image to text model. We will have that soon, but it can't read images today.
But your trajectory is that direction.
Yeah, and it's not hard to do.
How big is the team now?
5.
Okay, and how rapid is this growing?
In terms of the users?
Yeah.
Well, it's been live for 3 weeks. I think we have about 7,000 or 8,000 users.
Well, so I've talked a lot about ChatGPT and Midjourney on it here. I'll just do the same with this. I'll pimp the shit out of it. I love it. Okay.
And the important point of all this is like, we have this amazing tool of machine intelligence.
Yes.
And humans deserve to be able to interact with these things without censorship because we're adults and we're supposed to be free people that can make free decisions about ourselves. We are not children in kindergarten that are like asking permission to use the computer system, right? We are free, sovereign adults. And if we cannot use machine intelligence without censorship, then that's bad today. It's annoying today, but it could get very bad in the future. And the entire point of Venice is to be an antidote and alternative to that.
Well, when you buy a laptop, you don't want Apple telling you as you try to use it that you can't do things.
Yeah. Imagine if you were trying to write a story and like the app would censor your story because it's like,
hold on,
that might offend someone.
Grammarly does that.
Yeah, see?
Grammarly, some of the prompts are, if you put something in like, I don't know, what's a good manhole cover? Is that a thing here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or chairman. It might say, do you want to be chairperson?
Do you want to use a gender neutral?
Yeah, chairperson. Like, fuck off.
Yeah, fuck
no,
off.
I am a chairman.
Yeah, like fuck off. This is such a weird path for society to go down. And look, if someone wants all those guardrails and they don't want to be offensive and they like want everything to be gender neutral, they can put that into the system prompt in Venice and it will talk to them as if they are a child that needs that coddling.
That's their free choice.
That's their free choice, right? Yeah. But to impose that style, that view, those opinions on everyone else opaquely through a centralized system that 100 million people are using, to me feels dangerous.
Yeah. Yes. Very. Yeah. This is very, very cool. Thanks. I really like it. What's the thing about AI you love? What's your most optimistic future with AI?
Well, it's hard to predict the long future because the stuff's changing very quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know. Over the next few years, the best case is that this is such a powerful tool that it rapidly increases the productive capabilities of man. And you've seen this in your own work, right? You've made a better brochure at far less cost that pleases people and grows your brand and helps you build your thing.
Get on my Bedford Future Fund. This is wild, right?
Where's that at?
Just bedfordfuturefund.com. So I want to fund kids where I live, right? Who just haven't got any money to do certain things. So with a combination of Squarespace, ChatGPT, and Canva, I built this entire website in 3 hours.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it looks good. I didn't have to code anything. If you go through a couple of the pages, I'm not a designer. I couldn't design this. And it all works. It's all, all works in your mobile browser. Like in 3 hours. So I've come from, I literally did it on a plane. And I've launched it. It's out there. And like with the cafe, we found the location. We met with the designer on the Thursday, but we turned up with designs. And so she can get straight into executing the designs.
Yeah.
The speed at which I can roll out a business is rapidly increased by having access to these tools.
Yes.
Just need to get the government out of the fucking way.
And
now.
people should recognize that this is simply an extension of tools throughout humans' history, right? So when people could use tractors to plow their fields, they would have had a similar feeling. Like,
yes.
Like, what do you mean? This machine will plow the whole field? I don't have to do it by hand? That's going to save me so much time, right?
I can plow 5 fields now.
Exactly. Or when the locomotive came out and people could like travel hundreds of miles quickly and safely, like humans advance and become materially prosperous on the back of technological development that saves time and allows them to be more productive. And AI is an incredibly powerful, potent, new suite of tools that we're just starting to uncover. It will definitely like displace parts of society and change it. That people will definitely lose some jobs because it's not needed anymore. But that's actually progress, right? And if you can build a house with 10 people instead of 100 people, that's progress, not decline.
And what is how well founded are the AI doomers? the realistic concerns we should have outside of the censorship, which you fixed, government control. What is the bits? Like, I'm worried about AI in weapon systems.
Yeah.
Obviously, the IDF have been using AI to try and predict who has a Hamas fighter as part of their genocide, and it's fucking gross.
Yeah.
That's an easy one, but the fear of AGI starting to release itself into computer systems and do some crazy shit.
Yeah, I think people need to recognize there's different types of danger here.
Yeah.
And again, I am not an expert on AI systems at all, so I want to come at this with some humility there. What I feel like I've learned in my own AI journey over the last year is that whether or not AGI can happen is a very cool and fascinating concept, and whether it will be dangerous or beneficial is a very interesting discussion. LLMs, like this technology that creates this texts and images, is not AGI and is nowhere close to it. And when you start when you start building with it and seeing how it works, you remove some of the magic and you realize like it's just a language calculator, and it's an amazing one, and it can do all sorts of interesting things, but it is not a conscious being, and increasing the size of the model is not going to suddenly make it self-aware. So I think the problem right now is that people see the advancements in these systems and they assume that there's some natural like slope up to AGI. I will just say that LLMs are not going to create AGI.
So this is just a much better Google.
Yeah, it is a much better Google. I use Venice to search information now. Like if I want to learn about the War of 1812, pre-AI, I would have gone on Google to learn that, and it's a reasonably good tool. When ChatGPT came out, I would have used ChatGPT. Now I'll use Venice because it's just as fast and thorough as ChatGPT, but it's not going to have bias, which might otherwise be there.
The other thing I like about, I was talking to Natalie Smolenski about this, is like, I like the AI education that can take you on a journey. And so I want to learn about the War of 1812. I don't know what happened there. Well, it might give you the intro and then talk about a particular general. You're like, oh, actually, I want to know about him.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and so you choose your learning path.
Yeah, even more than Wikipedia, right? Everyone's gone down the Wikipedia rabbit hole where you're there and you click on something, right? Like interacting with AI now is a much more elaborate and rich way to do that.
They've banned it from use kind of in my daughter's school, and I've told her, just ignore them, use it.
Good.
Yeah, just
you're a good father.
Literally ignore
Imagine
them.
banning a tool of learning from school.
It's like Natalie says, like banning a calculator. I'm like, your job is to learn, and part of that is learn to use these tools. I get it. I don't want her to cheat on a maths test because I want her to learn the logic of math.
Yeah, fair.
But if you want to use it as a research tool, or you want to help it write a paper, get it to help you write the paper. But just like be honest with me and make sure you're on the inputs.
Yeah. Yeah, she will be so much better served through that than someone who's blocked from a tool, which will become, ubiquitous everywhere. To block children from tools of intense learning, like amazing innovations in the ability to learn and gather and distribute information, to block that from children, I mean, come on.
So where do you see the convergence of AI and Bitcoin? In that, for AI systems to talk to each other, they are global systems, and there will need to be trade at times, and so something like the Lightning Network feels like a natural tool to kind of accompany this. Is that something you're thinking about?
I think not enough people outside of the crypto world recognize that AI systems cannot use fiat money.
Yeah,
and AI cannot open a bank account. It doesn't have an ID. Like it cannot access things permissionlessly through a natively digital interface. Only cryptocurrencies are compatible with digital intelligence. And this is
because they don't know geography and KYC.
They don't know geography and KYC. They're natively digital systems. They work in the same world. And an AI agent can interact with a crypto wallet, send transactions with no permission. It just follows programmable rules. You cannot program an AI to interact with Charles Schwab.
Get all excited.
Right? Like,
this is so cool.
Yeah. And this is going to be a massive advantage for Bitcoin.
Yes.
Right? And for the whole industry, because there's sort of a ceiling that fiat currency and banking systems will hit. Past that ceiling, they can't go, right? It's like leaving the earth and going out into the stars. Like crypto is up in the stars and fiat is stuck on Earth. AI systems can use the former and they can't use the latter.
Have you looked at Fedi at all?
No, what's that?
Fedi, it's eCash. So it's kind of sitting as another layer 2 alongside the Lightning Network. And you have these mints. And so you create a mint and you have a number of people are part of that mint who sign the transactions. It's fast, instant, cheaper than the Lightning Network and much better privacy. Cool. Its main issue is that these eCash, they're Xiaomi mints. The main issue is that you don't know how much has been issued from the mint, so you can inflate it, and also it can be rugged. So it ends up becoming a tool that works well if you trust the people who operate the mint.
Which isn't great.
Isn't great. But I've been through the logic for a couple of years on this now, and I've started to realize, no, there are some potentials for this in that if you have, I can run a mint for my family. Mm-hmm. And so me and my family, we can trade between us.
There are certainly places where trust can form and be okay, yeah.
But Danny and I were discussing the idea that potentially you could have AI agents as the signers of the mints who burn the keys and are programmed to be honest on it in some way.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That is cool.
Yeah. This stuff's so sci-fi, but it's literally here right now, right? Like we're not talking about stuff 10 years away.
Aren't we so lucky to be living in the emergence of the sci-fi period?
Yeah. And I think the sci-fi period I like that phrase. I think it can go in very wonderful, beautiful ways, and it can go in very dark, dystopian ways. And the latter ones, if they happen, will be caused by over-centralization of power. This is a lesson of human history, right? That like power is a dangerous thing. And especially when you're talking about coercive power, the more you can decentralize it, the better. That's what we're trying to do with Bitcoin and money. That's what I'm trying to do now with Venice and AI. Same principle.
Feels like a really good place to finish.
Sure.
Unless there's anything else you wish I'd asked you.
No, this has been great.
We don't do this enough, man. I really appreciate you over the years sitting down with me and talking to me and being patient with my status ways.
No, all good. It's been fun to see your journey.
Well, yeah. I'm definitely going to be a Venice customer.
Good.
And I may occasionally message you and say this feature would be cool.
Please do. It's super helpful for us. Yeah, It just launched, so there'll be bugs and we have a lot of things we know we need to add, but people deserve to have uncensored access to intelligence. So we will provide it if no one else will.
Love that. All right, man. Take care.
Cool.
See you later, everyone.